How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Set 6, and it is time. It is time for the Chapter 14 breakdown of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm not sure, I say this every video, but I'm not sure how big this one's going to be. It could be a bit shorter than the previous ones, because everything's kind of quite condensed. But I don't know, we'll see how many rabbit holes we end up going down. That's what we need to watch out for. Them pesky rabbit holes. So, we're not going to waste any time. Like the video, subscribe to the channel for future content, and there's going to be a lot of future content, trust me, there's a lot of things that we can dive into even deeper. But for now, let's do this. Now the chapter opens with the Turks in a helicopter heading back to Midgar, Sung looking in a real bad way. Like Sung ain't doing good. Sephiroth did a bit of a number on him, and yeah, Sung's suffering. But then we go over to the other helicopter and Hojo's like, oh yeah, Sung's in a bit of a bad way. Do you want me to help out a little bit? And Rufus is real quick to shut that down because we all know what Hojo means when he says he wants to help out a little bit. Yeah, we all know what he means. And Rufus is quick to shut that down and he's like, you've got enough to play with. And we see Roche sat in the back of the helicopter and he's not looking good. He's looking like he's got this completely vacant look on his face now, as if he's just fully broken at this point. The events at the Temple of the Ancients have just kind of done him in completely. That's what it looks like. Rufus then asks Hojo to explain what just went down at the temple, basically. And Hojo says he pretty much doesn't have a clue. At this point, he's just kind of like, stuff. But then he makes a point that, at the very least, based on what they've seen, it shows that Shinra could do to dream far bigger. And Rufus is in agreement with this. So that makes a pretty big suggestion that we're going to see Shinra go absolutely crazy in Part 3. I don't necessarily know what that entails, but I would guess it will probably manifest itself for the most part in any kind of conflict with Wutai and what's going on there. I have been thinking that we'll probably see Deep Ground involved in the Wutai scenes in Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. And Deep Ground's an obvious avenue where they could do to dream far bigger. Do you know what I mean? They're already on the road with Deep Ground, so they push a little bit further with that and who knows what happens. So, pretty ominous stuff from the Shinra boys over here. The next scene that we cut to is of Zack, and Zack is chilling in the tunnels on his motorbike and he's trying to make a decision. Does he go to the right, to where Hojo is, and hopefully a cure for Cloud? Or does he go to the left, where we have reactor number 6, which Biggs has gone to blow up? Now Zack's struggling with the decision a little bit, but one thing that we do see, in this shot where he's pointing down the tunnels, we see a terrier stamp on the wall pointing in that direction to where Shinra HQ is, and we see another one on the wall just behind Zack straight after that. So we already see suggestions of where he's to go in order to continue playing out the fate of this world. Zack then looks at Aerith's hairband that he's got around his hand, and he remembers back to the conversation that he had with Marlene. And Marlene's talking about who it is that's going to kill Aerith, and it's Sephiroth, and Zack's a little bit taken aback by that. And then he goes on to ask Marlene about whether or not Aerith has feelings for Cloud, to which Marlene says, well, yeah, because you weren't around. And, you know, it was a rough conversation for Zack, this, bless him. Poor little Zack. But that moment kind of galvanizes him, because he clearly thinks to himself, well, if Aerith feels for Cloud, then that's another reason for me to protect Cloud, on top of the fact that I'm a friend of Cloud's. That gives me another reason to want to save Cloud. So that makes the choice easier for him, and he eventually follows the direction that the stamps are pointing and heads towards the Shinra building. But as he does so, we see this huge burst of radiant rainbow light just emerge from the other tunnel. And the burst grows down the tunnel, and then the screen flashes white, and then we move on to the next scene. Now, we don't know this yet at this point, but you can kind of infer this at this point, but that was another world being created in that moment to play out that choice that Zack didn't make. Now the screen stays white and we hear Aerith's voice trying to wake Cloud up basically, and telling him that we've not got much time left. Here we go. So Cloud wakes up, and he's in Aerith's room, back at the Gainsborough house in Midgar. There's no Marlene about. There's nobody else about in the house. There's no Elmira, Zack's not here, everybody else is gone. And if you eagle-eyed, you'll notice that in the background there's a bag of Stamps Champs, and it immediately indicates to us that we are not in the same world that Zack, Aerith, Marlene and Cloud were in. This is already a different world. I personally, when I first played through, was unsure whether or not we changed world when we leave the house, but it seemingly happens immediately. Now Cloud's a bit confused as to where we are, and Aerith has a little callback to his talk about it being a homecoming earlier on, which is just heavily suggesting that we are now in the live stream, but then she corrects herself to say, maybe homeward bound, which suggests that we're maybe not all the way there yet, we're kind of floating around just beforehand, and that's suggesting that we're in one of these worlds rather than returning directly to the live stream. But then she simplifies it and just says, let's just call it a dream. Yeah, my dream. Let's just call it that. Which suggests to me that this is a world that Aerith herself has created in this moment for this meeting to take place. Now, Cloud tries to start asking questions, but Aerith's just like, no, just shut up and just play along. And so we do. Now, when we get downstairs in Aerith's house, Aerith asks us not to look up when we get outside, because we won't like what we see. Now, Cloud points out that this is dumb. Why have you said this to me? Because I'm obviously going to have to look now. And when we get outside, he looks and he doesn't like what he sees, because what we see is that exact same tear in the sky that we've been seeing all the time in the world that Zack has been in. And it's beginning to seem, especially if we think back to the things that the Gi said earlier on, that when we start seeing the skies tearing apart, maybe the world is coming close to its end. And in the Zack world, everyone was talking about how the world's close to its end, this one's nearly done, and we're going to see exactly the same going forwards in this section of the game now. So the suggestion is very strong that when we see these tears in the sky, the world is close to its end. Just making notes for later. Yeah. Now, another thing as well is that at the early parts of this section of the game, and even throughout this section of the game, Aerith is acting a little bit odd. And I'm not 100% why. I don't know if it's straight up our Aerith with future knowledge that she's now reacquired, because she's now back with the white materia. And if all those memories were in there and that was taken away from us, now that she's back with that white materia, those memories have returned. Or they should have, at least. Or, rather than this being our Aerith, this is another appearance of that Omni-Aerith that we've spoke about. The same one that it seems like we had the resolution scene with in Remake. It's definitely a version of Aerith that knows what's going on. But there's also the addition of some mannerisms that are a little bit similar to Marlene, potentially. So, maybe there's some kind of amalgamation of the two. I don't know how that'd work, but there's definitely something a little bit odd going on with Aerith. Either way though, she's definitely an Aerith that's got knowledge of all these future events potentially, or at least knowledge of what's going on. And that makes me think it's probably more in line with being that Omni-Aerith type character, or at least an Aerith that's connected with the memories of that character. But anyway, the screen flashes white, we head into the town, and it's very much the same sort of setup that we saw in the Terrier timeline in Zack's world, where we've got these shopkeepers that are giving away items, one per person, and everyone's talking about the world ending and how we've not got long left. So it's a very similar scenario, and if it wasn't for the difference in stamps, it would be very difficult to notice that this is a different world. But it is. Anyway, we head over to a shopkeeper. We have a little bit of a conversation between Aerith and Cloud, where Cloud himself points out that Aerith is acting weird and that this isn't her. And from this point, Aerith kind of scales it back a little bit, or at least Cloud kind of meets her halfway. And it begins to feel much more like a normal interaction from this point forwards. And that kind of makes me, looking back, think that maybe Aerith knows what's coming, Aerith knows what she has to do. And that's kind of making her just act a little bit weird. She's nervous. She's stressed. She's got a lot going on, bless her. She's got a lot going on. So I can understand maybe why she's acting a little bit weird in that moment. And it does, like I say, it drops off from this point onwards now. Anyway, there are 3 gifts on the table for Cloud to choose one of. It doesn't matter which one you choose because the shopkeeper will immediately be like, oh, no. I meant anything but that one. No, you can't have that one. Here, take this instead. And gives us a small brooch that has got the yellow flowers on. Now, Aerith loves the replacement gift, which makes sense considering this is a world that she's created, so maybe it's doing what she wants it to do. Maybe she's kind of pre-programmed this. I'm not too sure. But Cloud's a little bit miffed about this. He's like, come on, man, I picked something and then he's not even got it. What are you playing at, man? The shopkeeper then says, I'll miss these moments, thank you both. And I'm not sure if he's just referring to this interaction that we just had right now, or if he's talking about prior interactions. I don't think there's really any other suggestion of what I'm about to say, but it almost makes me feel like they've been here for a while, and the consciousness that inhabits Cloud has just changed. I don't know, it's a bit weird. Anyway, we move on. Aerith drags Cloud over to the other side of the street, and we come to a sweet vendor. And same deal again, we can pick what we want, only one per person. And again, we see that same version of stamp that's indicating the world that we're in. And Aerith and Cloud eventually make a selection on which sweets that we want. But then, as with the previous stall, the stall owner says, oh, these aren't the only sweets that we've got. And she reaches under the counter and she pulls out this small plate with a load of different sweets that are predominantly variants of green, purple, and black. And, you know, live stream being corrupted vibes, anybody? Now, Aerith and Cloud eat the sweets and it doesn't taste right to either of them. And the shopkeeper says that, you know, she figured that she'd pull out all the stops considering this was her last hurrah, but maybe she pulled out too many. Aerith suggests maybe it could need a little bit of sugar, maybe something to sweeten things up. And the shopkeeper says that she needs to start all over again, but if only we had more time. If only we had more time. And the more I think about this small section of this scene here, it makes me think this is Sephiroth's plan. Now, here comes the first of those rabbit holes that I was talking about. We're not going to watch out for this one, we're just going to jump into it. What if Sephiroth's trying to do something to the live stream in order to make it palatable to himself and Jenova, more importantly? Because we know that the Gi can't return to the live stream. We've had that established to us earlier in the game, and that's because they are not of the live stream. But Tifa suggests, what if something could be done? And the suggestion could be maybe we change the live stream to the point where the new thing can join the live stream. And what have we seen throughout the compilation of Final Fantasy VII? We've seen Jenova and this corrupted live stream that's being created. We've had the whole geostigma thing because of it. And could it be that Sephiroth he was trying to make the live stream the way that he wanted for him and Jenova so that he could enact his plan, but he didn't have time. And maybe that's what the remake project is, and this manipulation of worlds that Sephiroth is going through. And we'll talk more about Sephiroth's manipulation of worlds a little bit later. But what if this is what he's looking to do? Change the live stream to the point where it is fully accepting of Jenova, so that Jenova and the live stream can become one, and therefore Sephiroth and the live stream can become one. I don't know, it's just this little interaction here with this shopkeeper just immediately got me thinking along these lines. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We'll continue, because, you know, we've got a lot to get through. But this is almost certainly going to be one of those subjects that gets its own video in the future. Anyway, moving on. Now, we flip back to Zack, and Zack has made it to the Shinra building. And we can see in the background, there's a sign that says temporarily closed with Terrier stamp on there. So we know we're still in that same world. It's still the Zack that we took that right-hand path with. Pretty much all of the lights are turned off and the place looks abandoned. And that makes sense because this is the Midgar that we saw at the start of the game, the one where the Shinra building has kind of been cut in half. So I'm actually quite impressed it's still in this state. But moving on, Zack has been followed by his fate, shall we say, because stood in front of him is a pretty large group of Shinra troopers. Now, if this was Cloud, it wouldn't be a problem, as we saw in the previous chapter. Cloud can take out this many Shinra troopers, no drama. But Zack, we're not so sure. And Zack basically says that this world's going to end anyway, so I've got nothing to lose, let's go. Revs his bike up, draws his sword, and just flies at the Shinra troopers, and that's it. That is the last time we see this Zack, as far as I can tell. So, the suggestion to me would be that Zack's fate realigned itself and he died. Let me know if you took anything different from this scene, but I definitely get the feeling that this is Zack's fate eventually catching up to him and neatening up the worlds. Or at least this one. But we don't specifically see anything that would indicate that he dies in this world. So you never know. This world may still exist. This variant of Zack may still exist. But after that, we cut back to Cloud and Aerith, and they're walking through the Sector 5 slums again. And everything's super normal until a few black feathers float down from the sky, and we hear Sephiroth's voice to Aerith say, "Oh, this is where you've been hiding, eh? Found you." And he points out that it's a world that's accepted its fate and that it's going to end, and so should Aerith. And Cloud seems entirely oblivious to this. He can't hear it, it doesn't see him, he doesn't see the feathers. This is purely Aerith that experiences this. And she runs up to Cloud, joins him, and they carry on going through the slums. But Sephiroth is here. We then come to a photographer who's got one last photo that he can take. And we enter into a posing competition, basically, with 3 other couples to see if we can get the photo. But then we get a flash of white, and we cut to Zack. Except this is not the Zack that chose to save Cloud. This is the other choice that could have been made, and this is signified immediately by the bag of Stamp's champs that Biggs is eating from, because we see a new variant of Stamp, this time a nice little pug. And Biggs and Zack start having a conversation, and Biggs talks about how the life streams run dry. It doesn't matter how many bombs we plant now, because that's it. It's done. It's over. And we can see that the reactor itself is empty of Mako, and I kind of feel like that suggests how much this world has got to give. Like, I feel like this world is pretty much just this scene that we're going to watch now, and then this world will cease to exist. In the same way that I feel Zack meeting his fate, or having his fate catch up with him in the Shinra building, was the final termination of that world. I feel like we're seeing these worlds closing down, and that's why, in that previous world, all of the flowers were dying. And maybe it gives us an explanation for why some of the flowers did start to rebloom again, because Aerith became more active and was looking to copy this world, essentially. And that's the world that we've ended up in with Cloud and Aerith. I'm not sure, there's a lot of weird connections potentially between these worlds, and the absence or presence of life stream, or the absence or presence of life blooming, which is essentially the same thing. If you think about it, without the life stream, life doesn't bloom. So yeah, it all comes down to the life stream. And this world not having any, pretty much, suggests to me that it's not going to be about for a long time. And as we see with the way the scene plays out, it probably isn't. Anyway, Biggs accidentally knocks the bomb into the hole. The bomb blows up but doesn't really do anything. And Biggs is kind of like, oh god, I'm rubbish. I'm so rubbish at everything. Why am I still here? And Zack does what Zack does best. He picks him up, he gives him a little pep talk. He's like, no, come on, man. People care about you. You're good people. You're good people. Come on, man. And he starts talking about how he came here because he wanted to do something. He wanted to take action. He wanted to take charge. And yeah, it very much feeds into him trying to outrun fate and destiny and take control and make the choices his. That's very much the vibe that we get from Zack here. And he says he wants to take back his life. And as he says that, Biggs dies. Because once again, Zack's fate caught up to him. A bunch of Shinra troops run in yet again, guns pointed at Zack, and Zack himself this time points out how fate's got a pretty twisted sense of humour, because here it is again, it's following him. The fate already followed him to the Shinra building in the other world, and now in this world, and we know it's not the same Zack because he's not got the pink fabric wrapped around his hand, so we know it's a different Zack. So it's already taken out the one that had the pink fabric wrapped around his hand, and now fate has come to get rid of this one. But this Zack, he decides to take fate into his own hands a little bit, and rather than running straight at the Shinra troops, he runs and jumps off the platform into the empty Mako pit, which is almost certainly going to be a death. Like, I'd be shocked if it's not a death. So, that's 2 Zacks down. Are there any more Zacks, I wonder? Who knows? But for the meantime, we flip back to Cloud and Aerith. And Cloud and Aerith don't get the photo taken. And Cloud asks, why did you pass up on us? And the photographer says, the vibe isn't right. They don't look like they're on a date. It's more like they're at a funeral. And it's so on the nose. It's super on the nose. But that's kind of what's going on here. It's kind of like a pre-funeral for Cloud and Aerith, almost. It's weird. It's very weird. And Cloud feels it as well and tries to get Aerith to talk to him and explain what's going on. What is this place? What's happening with you? And we see another black feather drop down. Cloud doesn't see it, seemingly, because he just flat out doesn't react to it. And Aerith says, okay, I'll tell you when we get to our spot. And Cloud's a little bit unsure as to where that is, but we end up making our way to the church. Before that, however, we go to the church, but it's a different church. And the way we know it's a different church is because while Zack sat on the steps, we see Johnny run past with another version of Stamp. And in this world, we've got Zack sat here trying to make the decision that he already made earlier. So he's debating, does he go for Biggs? Does he go for Cloud? Does he stay with Aerith? So this is clearly a Zack prior to the ones that we saw earlier. And obviously another world had branched off from another choice that Zack had made. And in this world, while he sat on the steps thinking about things, Sephiroth walks past. And Sephiroth seems to be checking out the church. And it makes me think that Sephiroth has got an eye on a lot of different worlds right now. And he's just going between each one, just going to the church, just trying to find Aerith. Now that doesn't exactly match up with what we've just seen with Aerith, because in that scenario, Sephiroth seems to know exactly where Aerith is. But maybe we're not seeing scenes exactly chronologically. Like I say, I feel like this scene is before the train tunnel scene that we saw with Zack. So it would make sense that at this point, Sephiroth is still looking about. I don't know. I might be reading that wrong. But either way, Zack jumps up and he's like, hey, do you want a piece of me? Because he knows that Sephiroth is after Aerith based on what Marlene has told him. But Sephiroth turns around and says, no, not you. And just slashes at him with his sword and pushes Zack between the worlds. And we see Sephiroth's whispers, the black whispers, pull Zack through into this space. And we see the rainbow radiance energy that we see that signifies a crossing between worlds. And then after that, we see Zack start fighting back against the black whispers in this space. And we see the white whispers appear and begin to help Zack, along with yellow flower petals. So obviously Aerith has reached in here and stopped Zack being... I would assume that Sephiroth was trying to destroy Zack in that scenario and was just going to push him into oblivion. But the flowers appear, circle around Zack, and then all fly off in one direction, basically saying to Zack, this way. And Zack follows. So Sephiroth potentially thinks he's dealt with Zack at this point. And I don't believe from this point onwards we see any other versions of Zack. That version of Zack that we've just seen get pushed through, that is the Zack that we now interact with going forwards, which seems to tie up all of the threads that were created from the Terrier timeline. All except one. And we cut back to that one, and Cloud and Aerith have made it to the church. Now, they start off having a little chat, and Cloud talks about how, yeah, that was easy, the church, and how she'll have to test him a little bit harder next time, And Aerith reacts really happily, like, yeah, next time. And then she kind of drops back into that somber mood again. But she says at least she knows now where they stand. And I think that in that moment, Aerith kind of confirmed to herself with that reaction how she feels about Cloud. And that's why she then goes on to talk to him about how she likes him. And she dances around the point a little bit, like, but then there's liking someone and then there's liking someone. And it feels like she's trying to tell Cloud how she feels about him properly, but she can't bring herself to do it. But she also knows that this is one of the last chances she's probably going to get. Or maybe she's hesitant because she's unsure what that'll do to Cloud, given what's going to happen in the very near future. So instead she just apologises because Cloud pulls her on it and he's like, what's going on? You've been really weird all day. What's happening? And Aerith just apologises, grabs him, gives him a hug. And while she's in this hug, she says, whatever happens, don't blame yourself. Which makes me think it was probably the latter thing that I was thinking a second ago. She wants to confess these feelings for Cloud, but she's worried about what the impact of what's coming will do to him. So she doesn't. The two stand there for a minute just holding each other, and then Aerith says thank you and gets back to what she needs to do, which is to give Cloud the white materia. And she steps away from him for a second, lets her hair down and takes the white materia out of her hair and gives it to Cloud. And Cloud tries to resist, but Aerith says, this isn't about me, this is about saving the world and you. So she's not only trying to save the world, she's trying to save Cloud here as well in this moment, which plays out with everything that she's already done in this scene. And again, she says thank you to Cloud for everything. And we see this burst of that rainbow-coloured light again, which, again, shows either something changing between worlds or a gateway between worlds. We see that effect again, and Aerith just pushes Cloud backwards and he falls into the hole between the worlds. So, basic gist of that scene feels to me like, I'm not sure if it's Aerith, Omni-Aerith, or some sort of combination of the two anymore, but she wanted to confess her feelings for Cloud in this moment, it seems, but then held herself back because of fear of what it would do to Cloud. And then she gives him the white materia and sends him back after having what is essentially her final moment with Cloud. At least that's how she's viewing it at the minute. We obviously don't know what's going to happen yet, because even Omni-Aerith is working off the fate that has already happened. And she doesn't know what's going to happen, if anything or anyone was to try and alter that fate. One other thing as well, just as she pushes Cloud into the hole, we see all of the flowers disappear. And that makes me think she's potentially used the last bit of energy that this world had in order to send Cloud back. And it makes me think this world probably ends now. Either that, or it's the one that sticks about a little bit later on in the ending. But we'll get there. The only problem is that as Cloud falls backwards into the life stream, we see Sephiroth open the door to the church. And Cloud shouts out to Aerith, but we see the Black Whispers immediately follow Cloud. So it makes me feel that maybe Cloud is the target at this point, rather than Aerith. Like, he's found Aerith. Aerith's already given Cloud the white materia at this point. So, realistically, Sephiroth just needs to go after Cloud. And this is where we get the infamous worlds scene. Now we see the White Whispers try to protect Cloud, and we gradually see Sephiroth's Whispers strip that protection away and make it so that Cloud is on his own. And this is when Sephiroth steps in and explains the worlds to Cloud. And what we see is a collection of images, all fractured across the sky of this area. It's not really a sky, but you know what I mean. And Sephiroth explains that when the boundaries of fate and destiny are breached, a new world is born. Or he says new worlds, so it's not even limited to just one. Sephiroth goes on to explain that the planet encompasses a multitude of different worlds, and that these worlds are constantly changing, growing, living, dying, and playing out all of these various possibilities that seem to come about when fate and destiny are broken. He explains how some worlds will live a very short time, and other worlds will live a very long time. but they'll always return to the planet. And then he brings back a line that we've heard a lot in the latter stages of this game, and he says that it's not something to be mourned, because it's not death, it's a homecoming. And everything is as one, living within the planet's embrace. And this is this grand reunion that Sephiroth seems to be trying to bring about. Not only of the planet and all of the errant worlds as Sephiroth described them earlier, but potentially of Jenova as well. Anyway, we continue on and we see the conversation, or at least a part of the conversation, between Aerith and Sephiroth at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And it specifically focuses on the bit where Sephiroth says, "If this world should be unmade, so too will her children." Not planet, world. And it's weird, it seems to suggest that if a higher up world is destroyed, then all of that world's children also cease to exist. And I suppose that'd end up creating a massive swell of life stream energy. And if you remember back to the OG, Sephiroth's plan was to gather a massive swell of life stream energy by damaging the planet with Meteor. Maybe this is just going to be another facet to that plan, maybe? By destroying a world higher up in the hierarchy, you can destroy all of the subworlds that have been made by that. I don't know. It's just a bit weird that they focused on that specific line. All born are bound to her. Should this world be unmade, so too shall her children. And then Aerith starts talking about the planet and how he'd do whatever he can to protect and preserve the planet, etc., etc. But that things aren't the way, that isn't the way things are supposed to be. But Sephiroth just talks about the world. And it makes me think, is that what he was talking about all along? Is this what Sephiroth has been talking about all along? It'd make sense. And it'd make sense that at that point Aerith doesn't really know what he's talking about. She doesn't seem to get context for what he's talking about until the Temple of the Ancients. So yeah, very weird that we get to see that specific scene. Anyway, we see a merger of two of these worlds in front of us, and it seems to be a very tumultuous experience. We see two of these massive swirling objects in this live stream space just kind of smash into each other and merge. And as it happens, Sephiroth and Cloud seem to both have very different experiences. Sephiroth saying, "Listen to the planet, listen to its ecstatic cries," and Cloud can only hear screaming. And Sephiroth's a little bit disappointed that at this point Cloud doesn't yet understand. And then we see the shot from the end of Remake, at the edge of creation between Cloud and Sephiroth, where Sephiroth asks Cloud to lend him his power, and the whole 7 seconds to the end bit, and then we come out of that, and Sephiroth's talking about how Cloud needs to forget the past and embrace the future, because they are to bear witness to the reunion of worlds. And it seems very much that Sephiroth doesn't only want Cloud to be a part of this at the minute. It seems like Cloud has to be a part of this in order for it to work for Sephiroth. And that connects up very well with post-OG Sephiroth and the way that he has to make Cloud the centre of his existence almost and tether himself to Cloud, so that as long as Cloud existed, Sephiroth existed. Maybe what we're seeing here is an extension of that. Anyway, we get a load more memory flickers from throughout Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and it finishes up with a shot of Black Cloak Cloud, which is a shot that we first saw in trailers, and it made everybody lose their minds a little bit. But one thing that this says to me is that this exists. This version of Cloud exists somewhere in one of the worlds, because otherwise we probably shouldn't be able to see it right now, unless this is Sephiroth weaving some illusion into this. And obviously we've got to understand, Sephiroth is up to his own thing, and he maybe is telling Cloud certain lies in order to push Cloud down a certain path more easily. So we can't take everything that Sephiroth is saying here 100% for granted. And I feel like this shot of Cloud in a black cloak is definitely one of those things that we maybe shouldn't trust. But if it is real, then it exists, and there is a world where this has happened. So that's quite interesting. Now Cloud tells Sephiroth to leave him out of it. He doesn't want to be involved in this. And again, Sephiroth, a little bit disappointed, says maybe you just need a little push. And he seems like he opens a portal in front of them to another world, and then he stands in front of the portal so that when Cloud attacks him, he goes through the portal, and that's the end of this scene. But just as the scene ends, Sephiroth says one thing to Cloud, and that is, "I give you my blessing." And we're jumping ahead a bit here, but I'm pretty confident that his blessing in this moment is the black materia. So I believe that this is the moment where Sephiroth puts the black materia on Cloud. But, moving on. Cloud falls and lands in a weird forest. Very strange forest. And Sephiroth immediately looks at Cloud and says that doesn't belong here, meaning the white materia. And what this suggests to me is that all of that scene that we just saw then happened in Cloud's head, potentially. Or at least separate, because we didn't see the white materia in his hands throughout that scene. Whereas as soon as he landed here, he had it in his hand. Which makes me think that this is a direct continuation to that moment where Aerith pushed him into the hole. So yeah, everything that went on there seems like it happened in that illusion space that Sephiroth and Cloud seem to be able to share, or at least that Sephiroth seems to be able to push onto Cloud. Anyway, we get attacked by Black Whispers and we fight our way through them. Sephiroth fails in his attempts to get the white materia off us, if that's even what he's attempting to do here. And then after a little bit we see a load of the white Whispers appear, and they seem to purify the forest of Sephiroth's influence. And at this stage, we get the scene from Final Fantasy VII, after the Temple of the Ancients, where Cloud's unconscious in a bed in Gongaga, and Aerith projects to him from the sleeping forest. And this scene very much follows the same script as the original, with Aerith talking about how she has to stop Sephiroth from using the black materia, and that only a Cetra can do it, and she's the last one. So the responsibility falls at her feet. Now the difference here is that Cloud has the white materia, and he takes it out of his pocket, reaches out to Aerith, and gives her the white materia, which she then swaps for the clear white materia that we've seen throughout the game, and she then gives the clear materia back to Cloud. I feel like this clear materia is going to come up at some point. It's definitely going to be something important that's going to come up at some point, and we'll talk about it again a little bit later. But Aerith disappears, and the dream for Cloud ends, with the White Whispers stopping Cloud from following Aerith as she walks deeper into the forest. Now after this, we get a series of scenes that connect what we've just seen with where we're going to be in the game. So we see Aerith and Cloud falling, we see Cloud protect Aerith as they fall, we see them both land on the ground, we see Aerith waking up, and Cloud remains in this state that he's in right now, which I would guess is a result of Sephiroth keeping him in that vision. And that kind of links up, so we see Aerith talk to Kate Sith, we see Aerith talk to the rest of the party, we see everybody leave following Sid, who's clearly leading them to the next location. Then we see everybody walking through the same forest that we just saw in the vision. Cloud still won't wake up, Barrett and Tifa keep trying, but in the end Barrett just ends up picking Cloud up and carrying him. And then Aerith stops everybody, says a few words, and walks into the forest on her own, with everybody else being stopped by a fog and a strong gust of wind. And I would guess that this then matches up with the scenes that we've just seen with Cloud and Aerith in the sleeping forest, because at this point, Cloud wakes up. While everyone's shouting for Aerith and trying to see what's happened with Aerith, Cloud snaps out of it. Now, after Cloud wakes up and Barrett's had a little bit of a moment of, damn, thought it was the degradation had got you or some Mako poisoning, Red 13 points out to us that Aerith has told us about an ancient city just ahead, and that Aerith's gone there in order to stop Sephiroth. Which we knew anyway, and so we head to the Forgotten Capital, at least after Cloud sees some Black Whispers leading him in that direction. Which means Sephiroth wants this. Sephiroth wants Cloud and the party to follow, because it all feeds into his plan. Yuffie gives Cloud a bit of shit about getting beaten senseless by Sephiroth, which Cloud tries to resist at first, but eventually he accepts it. Barrett questions him about what was going on because apparently he was mumbling and stuff like that while he was asleep and struggling, and Cloud tells him that he was in another world, at which point Barrett nopes out of the conversation. Red 13 says that there's something weird about the mist, and not only that if the Whispers control fate and destiny, does that mean that we were always destined to be separated from Aerith? And the answer is yes, but, he doesn't know that. And then Tifa comes over and gives Cloud now if you start thinking crazy stuff, you will tell us, won't you, Cloud? And Cloud's like, okay, I suppose. Just trying to reinforce the fact that Cloud does need to speak to people when things are going wrong, which he doesn't do. He keeps everything to himself, and he needs to stop that. Then Kate Sith comes over and says sorry. No one cares. And Cloud points out that he's still pretty pissed about it, but he's got more important stuff going on than murdering an animatronic cat. Which, yeah, he does. He does. And we're about to see that as we get through this passageway and get our first glimpse at the Forgotten Capital. I cannot believe we are 41 minutes in and only just at the Forgotten Capital. My God. It's going to be a big one, peeps. Vincent's already there chilling, and he gives us a little bit of exposition about this place and about how it was a place where the Cetra came to pray, and that it's been lost to the sands of time until today. And everyone's having a nice time as they arrive, talking about the temple and about how cool it looks. And then the Black Whispers turn up, and they start swarming around the area, and we all know that this isn't going to go well, and we all now know that these Whispers are in control of Sephiroth. And it's at that point that Sephiroth appears. And we get an extremely similar visual to the visuals that we got at the end of Remake, and Sephiroth seems to gather up all of the Whispers and gather up all of that power within himself. And after making a brief comment about Aerith praying, he reaches up to the sky, and a big rift opens in the sky, and we see that rainbow-coloured effect that starts to permeate the whole area, and he once again talks about the reunion, where worlds merge. And it very much feels like Sephiroth has set the scene, very much in the same way that he did at the end of Remake, with the Whisper Wall and then the portal that got opened. Sephiroth wanted all of that, and in the same way, Sephiroth wants all of this now, and he's created the perfect conditions for fate and destiny to be defied again. Now we see life stream tendrils come out of the portal in the sky, it seems, but then they change into black whisper smoke and just start swirling around the whole area, smashing through rocks, everything like that. And this seems like Sephiroth using that power that he's got to not only open a portal between the worlds, but to spread that corruption as well. Something that we've spoke about several times in the game. Anyway, Sephiroth does all of this and then poof, disappears. And we end up left with a load of white whispers swirling around the main body of the capital, and then black whispers kind of swirling around in between and trying to get purchase where they can. Anyway, we start heading down towards the main building. We fight a few white whispers on the way, which is a little bit odd, but it also kind of makes sense. Aerith's trying to keep us back at the minute because she knows how things go down. So maybe she feels like the best way to change fate and destiny is to keep us away, and therefore things may change. But we fight our way through, we stop them, and the party goes to enter the capital, and then the whispers appear again, but this time it's the black whispers, and they create a barrier to stop everybody else. And the only time that anything changes is when Cloud starts walking towards this barrier, and a few black whispers surge up behind him and punch a hole through this barrier, which says to me that Sephiroth's quite happy for Cloud to come in at this point, but not the others. And that is exactly what happens. Cloud goes through the portal on his own and ends up inside the Forgotten Capital. And immediately after Cloud has gone through, the barrier fixes itself and everybody else is blocked and left outside. Now that leaves Cloud inside the Forgotten Capital, and there's only one place to go from here. So Cloud heads to the central area and finds Aerith. Now, Aerith's trying to pray in order to activate the holy materia, but she's not sure if she's doing it right because she's never been taught. So she's just kind of doing what feels right at this point. And as we get closer to Aerith, the white and the black whispers begin to fight it out for Cloud. It definitely seems like there's a struggle going on here for control of Cloud in this moment. And Cloud pushes closer and closer, and eventually he reaches the point where he's in front of Aerith, and he just pushes all of the whispers away from him. But that creates a window for the black whispers to jump in, circle around Cloud's blade, and raise it up into the air. And we see very much the same scene that we saw in the OG, where Cloud is seemingly trying to resist this urge, this pull, to attack Aerith in this moment. And if Sephiroth gets Cloud to do this, that's it, he's won. If Sephiroth can make it so that Cloud actually were to follow through and kill Aerith in this moment, then that's it. Cloud's done, because if that happens, Sephiroth has got full control of Cloud at that point, and pushes Cloud into a pit of despair that he never pulls himself out of. But Cloud resists, and Cloud stops the Black Whispers and Sephiroth from making him do this. So Sephiroth decides to do his own dirty work. And as Aerith opens her eyes from her attempts at praying to activate Holy, we see a black feather drop down, and we see the usual scene where Sephiroth drops from the sky and tries to kill Aerith. Except this time, Cloud breaks free and defies fate and destiny, and we see that rainbow effect just radiate from Cloud's sword in this moment, and he rushes forwards and he meets Sephiroth's blade. They hold there for a moment, and Sephiroth gives this little smirk, because Sephiroth has got exactly what he wants here. Another one of those moments where fate and destiny is just basically ripped apart. Sephiroth is pushed backwards as Cloud deflects his blow on Aerith, and we see Sephiroth's blade stick into the ground, and we can see Cloud in the background, and we can see Aerith in the background, and everything's fine. And now that Sephiroth's got what he wants, the barrier drops, and everybody else can now enter the Forgotten Capital and try to catch up with Cloud and Aerith. Then we cut back, and we see the sword stuck in the ground again, but then we get one of those Jenova / live stream memory flickers, because we've seen it happen with the live stream for Aerith earlier. And the blade's angle changes slightly, and we see blood starting to spread across the ground. And Cloud spins around confused because he just knocked Sephiroth back, but now Sephiroth stood next to him with his sword through Aerith. And he pulls his sword out, and Aerith falls forwards, and so begins the confusion of Cloud, because at this point now, Cloud is perceiving two different worlds, pretty much. He can see the world where his actions saved Aerith, and then he can see the world where they didn't. Now, something quite interesting here is that when Aerith falls and the white materia falls out of her hair, the rainbow effect is still going on around us, which is telling me that something is going on between worlds still in this moment. Because the way it breaks down in a second is that in the world without the rainbow effect, Aerith is dead, and in the world with the rainbow effect, Aerith is alive. So the fact that we've got the rainbow effect right now, while Aerith falls to the floor and dies, is suggestive that the break in the worlds hasn't finished yet. Because in a minute, as we see, Aerith is lay down and awake, and then lay down and dead. So yeah, there's a little bit of a discrepancy between the two scenes here. And it makes me think that something is going on in this moment. I'm just not sure what. Maybe the form that these worlds are going to take is still being decided at this point. I'm not too sure. But yeah, we've still got the rainbow effect as the white materia falls and Aerith falls, and Sephiroth takes his sword out of Aerith. So yeah, interesting. Anyway, we see Holy do its little bouncy thing and fall into the water, and then Cloud runs over to Aerith and grabs hold of her. And as Cloud kneels there holding Aerith, Sephiroth starts laughing. And as soon as Sephiroth starts laughing, Cloud's perception begins to flicker, and we start to see him kind of shifting between the two worlds almost. And it generally feels like this is a weird space that the three of them are in, and that they aren't necessarily in one world or another in this space. It feels like this space that Sephiroth has created here, with this act of Cloud defying fate and destiny again. It feels like we're in an in-between worlds space at the minute. It's very strange. Anyway, Sephiroth's loving all of this, and he tells Cloud not to weep because, you know, he's not a real boy, he's just a puppet. These feelings aren't real, just like him. And we keep flicking between a version of Cloud that is in the middle of a breakdown, which is the Cloud that we see in the OG. And Sephiroth tries to snap him out of it by flicking blood off the end of his sword at Cloud. But then as that happens, Aerith reaches out and puts a hand on his cheek. And it's this, like I say, it's this weird state where Cloud seems to be between worlds in this moment and able to perceive both worlds. It's either that or the state of reality at this point is still quite malleable, because a couple of seconds after this, Barrett and Tifa and the others arrive there and they see what's going on, but they kind of see both versions of the situation as well. Barrett sees kind of Aerith being dead and sprints straight for Sephiroth to attack him, but then Tifa sees Aerith dead, but then not dead, but then dead, but then not dead, and it flickers between the two before landing on Aerith being dead. So like I say, it seems like the state of reality is just in flux at this moment. And it's not until now that Sephiroth says, "And so it begins." The whole confluence of worlds and emotions thing, where he's talking about the reunion. And he talks about how these moments take moments of joy and corrupt them into sadness and anger and hatred. And that's what he's trying to do with the live stream. He's trying to corrupt it with these moments. But not only that, he's trying to corrupt the worlds by just messing with destiny, it seems like, by creating these instances where destiny is broken to the point that a new world is created, and then he is able to use those worlds to his end. And he also suggests that he is much more in tune with all of this now, that after this event he's never felt these emotions so keenly. Anyway, we cut back to Cloud, and Aerith is awake, and she kind of gives Cloud a nod like, yep, let's do this. And Sephiroth goads Cloud again and says he'll never see the truth with such clouded eyes because he is just a puppet. And so it begins. We get the boss rush of all boss rushes. Now, we're going to go through this as quickly as we can, because we are at 52 minutes and we've still not even done the final fight. We've still not even started fighting. We're about to. So, I apologise for how big this video is. I'm sure there'll be a lot of you that say like, oh yeah, brill, cool, love it. But it's too much. It's too much, man. It's too much to edit. It's probably going to be late. I can already feel it that it's going to be late because of how much there is to edit here. Anyway, the first part of this encounter is against Jenova Lifeklinger, which is an interesting name. We had Jenova Dreamweaver at the end of Remake, and then worlds were forged from people's dreams. And now we have Jenova Lifeklinger in this moment where essentially Aerith is trying to cling on to life, or more importantly, Cloud is trying to cling on to Aerith's life. I feel like that's probably more accurate. But there's probably another facet to that we don't know about yet, because we didn't really know about the dreams and the worlds and the memories and things like that at the end of Remake. I mean, we did, but we couldn't piece it all together. So there's going to be another facet to this, I'm sure. Anyway, multiple phases of Jenova to fight through, and everybody has limit breaks except for Cloud, which is indicative of the fact that everybody has just seen dead Aerith and lost their shit collectively. Except for Cloud, who just had a little chat with her and she gave him a nod and he walked off to do his business. So you can see where the difference comes in there. Anyway, after several phases and several limit breaks, we finally beat Jenova Lifeklinger, and we see a big swirl of live stream energy and white whispers appear, and everyone's HP and MP is fully restored, and then the screen flashes white, and we can see around the periphery that rainbow effect, which suggests that someone or something is maybe about to transfer between worlds. Now, we leave that scene and we head back to Zack, and Zack is still running through the white space trying to find what he needs to, and the white whispers guide him towards Cloud. And he finds Cloud in this space, and Cloud's frozen in position at this point, and he's got that rainbow effect swirling around him, which suggests that he's being shown to Zack from another world. And as soon as Zack reaches out and makes contact with him, Zack snaps into existence right next to Cloud, and the place where Cloud is the edge of creation. And it seems like Aerith has brought both of them here to do battle with Sephiroth, because Aerith was the one that kind of created the rainbow effect around Cloud and the party, and Aerith is the one that has led Zack through the white space to this point. So it makes sense to me that Aerith has done this. Anyway, Zack and Cloud face off against Sephiroth, in the Edge of Creation, and it's a fun fight. Zack's a bit useless combat-wise, but it's fine. Cloud's gangster, so we're good. Now, as far as chat in combat, Zack and Cloud have a little bit of a moment where it's like, oh, what's going on with you, Cloud? And Cloud's like, follow my lead. And Zack's like, oh, I like it when you take charge. Excellent. Good times. Bit weird. But then we have a little bit of a chat between Zack and Sephiroth, where Zack asks Sephiroth what happened, how could you turn your back on everything? And Sephiroth just says, easily. Which makes Zack point out how selfish Sephiroth is, and that as long as he gets what he wants, that's all that matters. And Sephiroth just doesn't respond to that because, yeah, pretty much. What Sephiroth does do, however, is continue to point out to Cloud that, oh, Rage, how cute, you're a puppet, you've not got any real emotions, and things like that. He just keeps on trying to stab away at Cloud and chip away at him and make him feel and believe that he is a puppet. And Cloud reacts quite nicely. He says, I'm gonna kill you. So, you know, at the minute, Cloud is resisting. Very happy about that. And I feel like this meeting with Zack has the potential to do a lot of good. Maybe not in the immediate future, but in the longer term future for Cloud. I feel like this could be very good. Anyway, we clap Sephiroth's cheeks, and eventually he gets a bit bored getting double teamed, so he floats up into the sky, slices with his sword, and just separates the worlds again and sends Zack off, just banishes him to another world. And as Zack's falling through to the other world, he says to Cloud, save her. Obviously meaning Aerith. And Zack is, you know, off on his travels again. We'll catch up with him later. In the meantime, Cloud and Sephiroth have round 2. And Sephiroth switches it up a bit and he changes in to Bizarro Sephiroth, or Sephiroth Reborn. And it's a little bit odd that he turns into Bizarro Sephiroth at this point. At least if you think within the context of one world. Because like Bizarro Sephiroth shouldn't be ready to do this yet. Bizarro Sephiroth is essentially the cocoon that Sephiroth exists within at the North Crater, with Sephiroth emerging out of it, and that's the upper part of it. That hasn't happened yet because he's not got the black materia, he's not got the power necessary in order to do that. Unless you stop thinking about this as if it was one world, because it isn't, and there are multiple different worlds, and in some of them we may already have reached Bizarro Sephiroth point. So I believe that's why he's able to manifest it, especially if we're thinking that this is a point after the OG that Sephiroth's reached back from in order to start all of this. Then it makes even more sense. So yeah, Bizarro comes early, no birth of a god, fuming about that. Let's keep going. Just like how earlier we had the multiple stages of Jenova, we now have the multiple stages of Bizarro Sephiroth, with Bizarro Sephiroth falling through the worlds, it would seem. Or if not falling through the worlds, this space that I was talking about earlier, this area around where Aerith was killed, I said that it was a very weird malleable spot that seems to have been created, where worlds seem to cross over and converge. Very much now that I think about it, in the same way that Midgar could be. But either way, getting back to the point, maybe Bizarro Sephiroth isn't falling through the worlds, but maybe it exists in all of these separate worlds at the same time. Either way though, whichever it is, Cloud first has to fight Bizarro Sephiroth, then the rest of the party has to fight Bizarro Sephiroth, and then Zack has to fight Bizarro Sephiroth. Now, to quickly catch up with Zack, he's been floating through this in-between space, in between the worlds for a little while, and he finds a representation of Aerith's church. And he lands in it, and most of the flowers are dead except for one or two, just like we saw in the Terrier timeline, where a couple of the flowers are still alive, but most of them are dead. And I believe that that's indicative that this world doesn't have much power. And we see that even further when Bizarro Sephiroth arrives, because he illuminates the whole area, and we can see that this world is literally just the church. Not even the whole church, just some of it. Just a little spot for Zack to land and do what needs to be done. And we see that at the same time as this fight is going on between Zack and Bizarro Sephiroth, Cloud and Bizarro Sephiroth are fighting as well. And if you charge up a synergy attack, you can use a synergy attack still between Cloud and Zack, which is pretty cool. Now, after Zack defeats Bizarro Sephiroth where he is, we cut back to the party and they defeat Bizarro Sephiroth where they are, and then we cut back to Cloud and Sephiroth drops out of his Bizarro Sephiroth form, and he's just back in his one-winged angel form at this point. And Cloud's ready. Cloud's ready to fight him. Cloud's up for this. But as Sephiroth fires a bunch of black whispers at Cloud, we see a group of white whispers emerge, and they deflect the black whispers and protect Cloud. And then we see a portal open up behind Cloud, and Aerith walks out. And as she does, she purifies this space. All of the debris that's floating around in the air, that disappears. All of the black whispers, they disappear. The sky changes to take more of a white aesthetic, much more in line with what we've seen when we're dealing with Aerith visions. And Sephiroth admits in this moment that he underestimated Aerith. And this 100% is not just our Aerith from Rebirth. This is 100% either a fully awakened Aerith from Rebirth, with all of the memories, or it's the Omni Aerith again. Or it could be both. It could be the Omni Aerith acting through our Aerith. There are a few different possibilities for the arrangement, but either way, it's an Aerith that knows. That's what it is, it's an Aerith that knows. And Sephiroth underestimated her in a pretty big way. And it shows that he's a little bit worried in this moment. Maybe not worried, but he understands that he needs his power because we see him absorb the whispers around him. The few whispers that remained just get sucked up into his blade, and then Sephiroth's ready to fight. And fight we do. But we don't care about the fight. We care about what gets said during the fight. And the first thing that gets said is from Aerith, and she says that she saw what Cloud did back there. Thank you. And Cloud says, thank me later, this isn't over. And Aerith agrees, okay, yeah, let's do this. And this is what makes me think that this isn't a delusion that Cloud is going through. This is real. And Sephiroth immediately tries to stab at that. And he says, what do you think about this, Cloud? Is it real? Or is it all just a fever dream? Just try to mess with him, try to continue that narrative that Cloud is a puppet. And Cloud tells Sephiroth not to even bother, that shit ain't gonna work on me anymore. And I think that's because of two things. I think it's one, the interaction with Zack, and two, the consistent interactions with Aerith in this chapter. And then there's also the fact that he broke free of the Whispers and Sephiroth's will, and defied destiny himself. So he's got a lot of strong stuff reinforcing the fact that he is not a puppet. And he's got Aerith at his side here, right now, fighting against Sephiroth. So this is a Cloud right now who might be wrong about what he thinks still in some aspects, but he's confident that he's not a puppet. He's confident in who he is to a degree. Now Aerith tries to quiz Sephiroth during the fight and asks him how can he want this? And Sephiroth just dismisses her, like, be gone, you've played your part now, you're not necessary anymore. And that makes me think that the continued presence of Aerith going forwards into part 3 is going to be a big thing that fights against Sephiroth and pushes against Sephiroth and hinders his plans. So I think we'll definitely, like a lot of people are expecting Aerith to be gone in part 3. I think we're going to see Aerith more in part 3 than we did in the latter stages of the OG. And you still see Aerith a lot in the OG after she dies. I think we're going to see more in Remake Part 3. So Sephiroth's going to regret underestimating Aerith. Like, I can feel that in a big way. And not just in the way that he regrets it in the OG, but this new plan that he has of reuniting all of the worlds and corrupting the live stream and taking control with Jenova. He seems to have underestimated her in that plan as well. Anyway, we beat Sephiroth up, the fight ends. And Sephiroth's a little bit roughed up, we make him drop to a knee. But then he stands up, smirks a little bit, and flies off. And once he's flown away, he stops in the sky, turns around and looks back at us and starts chuckling a little bit. And Cloud's a little bit like, why is he laughing? And Aerith points out that he knows this isn't over. Because it isn't. Sephiroth's got what he wanted today. Granted, Aerith's been a little bit more of a thorn in his side than he expected, but he got what he wanted. Anyway, the white whispers start to swirl around Cloud and Aerith, and we see them taken back to this white space, the actual live stream at this point. They've been taken out of the world that they were in, and now they're back in the live stream. And the two of them stand back to back, and they hold hands, but then Aerith fades into live stream and disappears. And this suggests to me that A, she won't be able to come back to this main rebirth world. Physically, she can't come back to that. But it also shows that Cloud is now alone. At least for a short time. Now that's all of the fights, all of the combat encounters done for the end of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So now we're just in the ending cutscenes. And the first thing that we get is a shot of the church. But more specifically, the church that's kind of floating in nothingness. The one that Aerith put in place to catch Zack. And we see the White Whispers swirling around, trying to hold this place together, it would seem, after the defeat of Bizarro Sephiroth. But eventually this world, even though it's only a small pocket world, is going to fall apart. So, a portal opens in the ground beneath Zack's feet. We see the same rainbow effect that we've seen over and over again, and it seems like the White Whispers, the Aerith Whispers, have created a pathway for Zack to leave this doomed world and hopefully find himself in another one. Now we get a shot of Aerith lay in the middle of the white space, and we see the White Whispers swirling around, and then as one of the Whispers sweeps in front of the camera, it switches back to the real, I say real, but who knows which is the real world anymore, the remake world, and we see the rest of the party gathering around Aerith, and Tifa's on her knees in tears because Aerith's dead. But then again, one of the Whispers sweeps in front of the camera, and the perspective changes, and we've got the rainbow effect showing again. None of the party are there, and Cloud kneels down next to Aerith, and the music takes on this more somber tone, this more melancholic and almost sinister tone that it maintains throughout most of the ending now. But Cloud tells Aerith to wake up, and she does. And she doesn't say anything to him, she just smiles at him. And after that we skip a solid chunk of the events that are supposed to happen at this point. So in the OG, we're supposed to see everybody kind of have a moment mourning over Aerith, and then we get the scene where Cloud lowers Aerith into the water, just outside this main building in the Forgotten Capital, and Aerith sinks to the bottom, and that's the end of the scene. We don't get that here. But I think we can be pretty certain that it happened because of a few things. I mean, first off, why would everyone be gathered here? But secondly, because we see a pretty large amount of life stream seeming to rise up from the water. It could be nothing because this whole area is pretty much just permeated with life stream all the way through it. But it's interesting that we see it coming up from the water, especially given what those of us who've played the OG know is supposed to happen here. So my guess is that that scene has played out, but Cloud has either suppressed it completely, or due to the fact that he's kind of seeing between two worlds right now, he seems able to perceive two worlds. Maybe he just switched his perception off for this section. We saw it happening when he was on the ground holding Aerith and Sephiroth was calling him a puppet and flicking blood at him. We kept seeing Cloud hop between those two different perspectives. So maybe that's what we're seeing here. Either way though, whatever the case may be, the event seems to have happened still. Cloud still seems to have lowered Aerith into this water. That all seems to have still gone down. It just seems that Cloud has suppressed it or not perceived it. Whichever way that goes. Everyone else, however, is distraught. They clearly saw what went down, and they're clearly only perceiving things in this world. It only seems like Cloud is the one that's able to perceive anything beyond. Well, except for maybe one person. But we'll get into that in the final scene. What we get here instead is a moment where everybody seems to be mourning except for Cloud. And Barrett heads over and says to Cloud, "Come on, we need to get moving." And Cloud just responds like, "Yep, let's go, cool." And as he says it, you hear Tifa like, she lets out a sound of shock, almost disgust, at the fact that Cloud's just like, "Yep, come on, let's go." But then we see why Cloud's like that, because he has a memory flicker. He sees Aerith fall. He sees the white materia fall. And then as he comes out of it, he looks to his side, and Aerith's just sat there. And she says to Cloud, "Come on, I'll see you off." And a lot of people took this as, this is supposed to not be Aerith. This is Jenova. And I don't think this is Jenova. I think this is Aerith. I think the fact that the music takes a creepy tone to it is because of the implications of what this scene means. It means that Cloud is not only broken within himself, but he's also broken across two worlds almost. And it just seems to add another level of damage to Cloud. And if that is the case and he's broken across two worlds, then this Aerith in the other world knows what's happened. That's what it feels like to me. She knows that Cloud's a bit broken right now. The world that she exists in might not be a thing for too long. And not only that, she can't really support Cloud anymore. So she's kind of trying to do her best right now to support Cloud. But to us, the viewer, it all comes across very creepy and very, very concerning as far as the future of Cloud and his mental state, which is already far worse than it was in the OG at this point. Anyway, everybody leaves, and Cloud and Aerith leave, and as everyone's walking off, we get a shot where Cloud stops and he turns to Tifa and he says, "Tifa, come on," and Aerith stood there next to Cloud. And then the perspective switches to Tifa's perspective, and she can only see Cloud. So just a further little bit of confirmation for us that what Cloud sees and what everybody else sees aren't the same. There are two different things going on right now. But I don't think it's internal to Cloud. Especially not with everything that we've already seen in Rebirth to do with the worlds and everything like that. And we'll get a little bit deeper into it in a minute when we get to the actual final scene. But with everything that's gone on, this doesn't feel like it's an internal thing to Cloud. Anyway, we've got a few scenes to hop around now. We move away from the Forgotten Capital and the party for a little bit, and we cut to Midgar. And Rufus is stood there doing his best President Shinra impression by staring out of the window, and then everyone's favourite weirdo, Glenn, turns up. And we get a few moments out of this. We get Glenn questioning where Viceroy Sephiroth was the other day, and Rufus basically says, yeah, if you didn't have such a cheap set, maybe I'd have turned up. Which almost certainly isn't the reason why he didn't turn up. He probably just decided not to turn up because he was busy dealing with the whole Sephiroth thing, and the whole Keystone Temple of the Ancients thing, but either way, he didn't turn up. And Rufus says to Glenn that he's onto him, and that this war is just something to distract him from what Sephiroth's up to. And Glenn has a little chuckle, and then he drops the illusion and shows that he is Sephiroth. So what we've got going on here is we've got a black cloak that's being used to show Rufus the vision of Glenn, but then Sephiroth switches it to show the vision of himself, and then we get both kind of overlapping with each other. And this is another thing that I'm not 100% on. Is it the fact that Glenn is completely gone and Sephiroth is just using the tools at his disposal, one of them being Glenn? And we also get a bit of foreshadowing here because Rufus shoots Glenn in the back and Glenniroth pops up like in the back, just like old times. And we've already seen that shot of Rufus shooting Glenn. That happened, I believe it was back in chapter 4 when we were in Junon. So we see that shot of Rufus shooting Glenn in the back and Glenn dies. Or at least we thought he did. Or maybe he did. Maybe Hojo got his hands on Glenn at this point in the same way that he wanted to get his hands on Sung. So maybe Glenn is a little bit more than just one of the puppets, one of the tools that Sephiroth has at his disposal. What if Glenn turned out to be another semi-successful Sephiroth clone? I don't know. There's something going on. It feels like there's a little bit more to this than just Sephiroth using this body as a puppet and showing Glenn through it, just to mess with Rufus. I don't know, it feels like there's a bit more to it, and we'll definitely get more information as we hopefully get the story between Rufus and Glenn from the First Soldier, because episode 2 of the First Soldier should be dropping reasonably soon-ish, I think. So hopefully we get the details from that, and we can continue to build this picture that we've got of the relationship between Rufus and Glenn. Anyway, Rufus shoots Glenn many, many times, so I don't know what kind of position that's going to leave things in when we get to part 3. Is Glenniroth still going to be popping up just to mess with Rufus, or is that done now and we're just going to see more of a direct conflict between the two of them? It remains to be seen. I also love the fact that I was predicting it was going to be Glennasis, and it ended up being Glennaroth. I was close. Anyway, moving on. Next scene, we come to the weapons. And we see the weapons, well, I say weapons, baby weapons, proto-weapons. We see them swimming up towards this massive ball of black whispers that are swirling around under the water. And the two weapons swim over to the ball of whispers, they kind of get engulfed by it and they all start swarming around the weapons. But then we see this massive radiant burst of energy come from both of them, from the giant materia that exists within their torso, and the black whispers dissipate. And after this, the two weapons swim away, and we do end up with what looks like a swirl of whispers still there. But previously, when you looked at this swirl of whispers, you could see the purpley white orb in the middle of the face space, that indicated that they were Sephiroth's whispers. After the weapons do the little burst, you don't see any indication of that, or at least I don't think you do. Now, I will point out that you don't really get a good look at the whispers after this, so it could be that we just don't get the correct angle to see this. But could it be that Holy activating has done two things here? Number one, Holy activating has notified the weapons that the planet is in danger. And the way it's done this is by lighting up that materia that's in their torso. So that lights up, the weapons know that the planet is in danger, and we could potentially see these weapons go from this proto-weapon state that they're in now to a full active weapon, now that the planet is in such a state of peril that Holy is required. But on top of that, could Holy's interaction here have maybe purified these whispers and changed them from being the black whispers, the Sephiroth whispers that we've been seeing all game, and maybe reset them back to being the planet's whispers? I don't know. I'm reaching on that when you don't really get a good look, but I do feel like this is the moment where Holy activates and the planet realizes that things are going bad, and therefore it activates the weapons as well. That's kind of what I think's going on here. On top of that, we also don't really have an explanation for what's going to happen with this mark that we see on the weapon's shoulder, because we saw previously in the chapter where Tifa was in the live stream, Sephiroth attacked the weapon and left this big mark, this scar across its shoulder. The fact that that's kind of being prominently displayed to us in this scene could potentially mean something for the future, but it's not much to go off, so just keep a note of it. Now the next scene that we get focuses back on Zack, and Zack is back in the church, but it's not the churches that he's been in previously. This church has all of its walls, only has one, maybe two holes in the roof, and has flowers blooming within it. And the suggestion here is that this could be the remake world itself. So we're no longer in the Terrier timeline, or any of the other timelines, the Pug timeline, the Chihuahua timeline, whatever timeline it was. We're now back in the Beagle timeline, and Zack has somehow found his way there. I say somehow, but Aerith has clearly guided him there. Now, if this is the case, then this is the strongest indicator yet that Aerith could still somehow survive. Because if Zack has survived in Remake, been shunted into this other world, but has then, by the end of Rebirth, made his way into the Remake world, this is so confusing, but you get what I'm saying, it shows that there is a pathway for people to come back, basically, and survive. And Zack himself says it here, that worlds may be able to be torn apart, but what's to say that they can't find each other again? We then skip ahead to the next day, and we see in Nibelheim all of the Black Cloaks have started leaving. They've all got on their feet and started moving the way out of Nibelheim, and we can see the Black Whispers guiding the direction that they need to go. But not only that, we do see something a little bit weird in the background as well, and we see what looks like one of those swirls of Black Whispers that are normally there to protect something. They're normally there to protect an event or something like that, or try and gather power. But we can see one of those swirling around in the background of Nibelheim. And we don't get any indication as to what it is, but it's there. And the Whispers seem to be breaking away from it and pushing the Black Cloaks in a specific direction. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes of that when we learn a little bit more and we get to Remake Part 3. But yeah, the Whispers seem to be pushing the Black Cloaks towards Mount Nibel from the looks of it. Anyway, we get to the final scene, and everyone's trying to work on the plane, and everyone's trying to repair the plane, and Cloud's just sat there looking at the clear materia that he got from Aerith. And speaking of Aerith, Aerith's walking around, and observing what's going on. But no one seems able to perceive her other than Cloud up to this point. And Sid asked the question, what was it that Aerith actually did? And no one knows. And just as that question gets asked, the engine kind of backfires, and we see a big kick out of smoke and dust and force, and everyone reacts to it except for Aerith. And this is because in my mind, she's in the same sort of state that Cloud's in at the minute. She's in one world, but can perceive the other. So she doesn't necessarily feel the physical impact of the plane's engines clearing themselves out, but she can perceive it, and she can perceive what's going on in this world, in the same way that Cloud can perceive what's going on in the other world. That's what it feels like. Anyway, Sid's got everything fixed now, and we hop around the rest of the group, and Yuffie is very upset. Tifa and Red 13, very upset. And Red 13 is the only other person who seems able to perceive Aerith in some way. Because when Aerith reaches out and puts a hand on Red 13, he feels it and he looks up and he's like, Aerith? So it's very interesting that he can perceive that. And it suggests that there's more of a connection between the two of them than we were led to believe initially. We flip back to Cloud though, and Cloud can still see Aerith down there, and Cloud's still sat there looking at this orb of clear materia, and it's definitely going to end up being a very important plot point, and it's going to be something that comes up again, this clear materia, because we've had it established to us that people can pour certain feelings and certain emotions into the materia in order to change what it does. And I don't know if that's something that we're kind of driving towards. The Gi have kind of established that for us. The Ancients have confirmed that for us. So is that something that we're going to see? I mean, one possibility is that maybe it could be used to transfer someone's essence from one world to the other. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, Cloud goes to put the clear materia back in his pocket, and as he puts it in there, he hears a little clink, and he reaches into his pocket to see what else is in there, and he pulls out the black materia. And this is going back to what I said from earlier on. When Sephiroth says to Cloud, "You have my blessing," that's when he essentially sneaks the black materia into Cloud's pocket. Because he knows that Cloud needs it. He still needs Cloud to have it. He's still got to push Cloud a little bit further over the edge. But not only that, the black materia seems to have the effect on Cloud right now of undoing all of the good work that's just been done in the end of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So the moment where he fights alongside Zack, the moment where he fights alongside Aerith against Sephiroth, all of that positivity that's been done. Because Cloud in the middle of the fight is screaming at Sephiroth like, that ain't going to work on me, let's go. He's all about it. But now he takes out the black materia and immediately he has like a Jenova memory flicker. And the first thing that he says after that memory flicker is the reunion. So at this point, everything's just been undone. In my mind at least, the black materia was placed on Cloud by Sephiroth because he knew that stuff was going to go down, and he knew that he needed a fail-safe, something to reset Cloud back to where he wanted him, and not where Cloud might find himself. And that's what the black materia does here. Anyway, the group shout Cloud and tell him to hurry up. Cloud jumps up and says, yep, fine, I'm ready. And he merges the black materia into the Buster Sword. And shout out to Mephisto for the amazing shout that this is going to be how he learns Meteor Rain in Part 3. And I think that's it. I think that's 100% it. Well done, Meph. As Cloud's walking over, he hears Aerith's voice telling him, you have to promise, don't look up. And he reiterates that to the group after looking up and seeing a massive tear in the sky. But nobody else can see it. And this makes me think that this tear could be in the other world, rather than in this world. It may not be the case, it may be that it's in this world, and because Cloud is the one that has traversed the worlds, he's the one that can perceive it, but it's also possible that it exists in this other world that was created when Cloud tries to save Aerith. It could go both ways, but either way nobody else can perceive it, it's only Cloud. And that feels a little bit different to the world that Zack was in, because in the world that Zack was in, everybody could see it. It remains to be seen how this goes. Maybe more people will become aware of it as Part 3 proceeds. But this could be suggestive of a few things. It could be suggestive that we are now in a different world than we were in Rebirth. It could be suggestive that the Rebirth world itself is close to coming to its end. Or it could be suggestive that Cloud's brain is literally broken. It could be any of the above. So we need to keep an open mind going forwards with this, but I'm reasonably confident that this is Cloud seeing more than the others. Not seeing false things, but seeing more. And just before we get on the plane, after establishing that we need to go north because Sephiroth's there and we need to stop Sephiroth, Aerith appears again. And her and Cloud have a conversation about how she's going to stay there and she's going to do everything that she can to put her prayers into stopping Meteor and using Holy, and Cloud needs to go and stop Sephiroth. And in the end, Cloud says that, he will stop Sephiroth. And Aerith says, promise? And Cloud says yes. And immediately, no promises to keep kicks in. And then the final bit of the scene plays with the tiny Bronco flying off into the distance, and Aerith just standing there watching the plane leave, and she solemnly says goodbye. And then at that point, we get the text flick up on the screen that says no promises await at Journey's End. And it's an interesting one, this, because no promises to keep is quite clearly about Cloud and Aerith, and it feels weird that Aerith asked him to promise at this point, especially when the song is about them not needing promises to each other. And apparently in the Japanese version of this text, they don't make a promise to each other. They just say to each other that they're relying on each other, basically, and that I will stop Meteor and I will stop Sephiroth. So it's a bit of a weird translation issue that's going on here, potentially, and it could end up being something similar to the end of Remake, where Aerith's line about missing the steel sky was replaced with a line about hating the sky as it is now. And that makes me think that Aerith, as I stated previously in one of the videos that we've already done, I think it was chapter 7 maybe, where Aerith's kind of looking up in the sky and says, which way was Midgar again? And Red 13 points her in the direction of Midgar, and I feel like she's been able to see this tear in the sky since the end of Remake. But because Cloud hadn't traversed the worlds yet, he couldn't, whereas now he can. And that just opens up a lot of possibilities. But yeah, it's very weird that we get this moment where they make promises to each other, then the song about no promises to keep kicks in, and then a piece of text pops up on screen that says no promises await at Journey's End. Feels very weird. This is something that's going to get its own video because I don't want to dive too deep into it right now. We're at an hour and a half already, and there's still a little bit more to talk about. So yeah, we'll definitely dive into this further, potentially in the conclusion video if I end up doing it, or potentially in its own video. But it's definitely weird. Anyway, at this point the credits roll, and you might think, well, that's it, the game's over, there's nothing else interesting to go on. But there is one more thing that's a little bit interesting. And that's the fact that during the credits, on the opposite side of the screen to the credits themselves, we get little clips, little snippets of the events that happen throughout Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Even the flashback, everything like that, it's all here. Every single moment is detailed as we go through the credits. And I mean literally everything. The Guy stuff, the Zack alternate world stuff, all of it. It's all in here. Except for one scene. And we all know what scene that is. We see the scene where Cloud is on his knees with Aerith, and it's the scene where he tells her to open her eyes, and she does. And then there's nothing. Blank. And it doesn't come back until we get to the scene in the Shinra building between Rufus, Glenn, and Sephiroth. Gleniroth. So that entire segment where we know that Aerith should be being lowered into the water and Cloud should be like having his big sad moment there and everyone else should be having the big sad moment there. That's gone. Cloud has not registered that moment. And then again, a few seconds later, we see the scenes with the Black Cloaks in Nibelheim all leaving, and then we get nothing. So we don't get the stuff with Aerith reaching out to Red 13, we don't get the conversation between Aerith and Cloud, we don't see the tear in the sky, and we don't see the promises. But we do see Aerith watching the tiny Bronco leave. So there are two distinct gaps in that retelling that goes on alongside the credits, and it just so happens to be that they are two of the most contentious moments in the game. The burial of Aerith, because we all saw what happened when Sephiroth tried to kill her. He succeeded, but he didn't succeed. Both outcomes played out. So we saw that, but what we don't see is the burial, and what we don't see is that conversation where the promise happened but potentially didn't happen because mistranslation maybe. We shall see. They've changed lines before, they might change them again. And it's pretty telling that they didn't change it until Rebirth was just about to come out, because they will have had the voice cast in and ready to record things. So if we're going to see any lines change, I would expect that it wouldn't be until, you know, they've got the voice cast in and recording for part 3. That's when it's going to make sense. Anyway, the credits finish rolling and the game ends. And we've done it. That's the end of the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth chapter breakdowns. There's a lot to think about. I'm not going to go too deep into a conclusion here because, wow, we're at 1 hour and 30 minutes already. This is going to take so long to edit. I can't cope. But it's done. I think what we'll do is we'll probably do that conclusion video at some point, but if not, we'll be breaking out each of the more important points throughout the narrative into their own videos over time. So don't think that I'm not going to go a little bit more granular on some of these things, especially the bigger plot points, and especially some of the more obscure plot points as well. You know, try and find some connections for things. But I think take-homes from this chapter, Sephiroth got exactly what he wanted. Aerith is both dead and not dead, and Cloud's brain is already ludicrously broken anyway, but now he seems like he's able to perceive two different threads of existence at the same time. So yeah, Cloud's in a real bad way. Cloud's going to have a rough time in part 3. And again, all of the good work that was done to fix Cloud was undone at the end by the Black Materia. And it's Sephiroth just showing that he's a few steps ahead of everybody. He knew what was coming, so he made sure that Cloud had that Black Materia in order for it to reset him. It's crazy. It's crazy. We also have this emerging plot of Sephiroth's, which seems to be to corrupt the live stream to the point where he and Jenova can just fully take over it and do whatever they want at that point. And it seems like the method he's going to use to do that is not only by causing damage to each world individually, be it by summoning Meteor or whatever else he does, but he's also going to try and merge all of the worlds together into one. And it definitely leans into my belief that this remake world, the Beagle timeline if you will, is not the OG timeline. And we're going to reach into something that happened the other day. Nomura did an interview where he was talking about this. If you can put up with my voice any longer than the hour and a half that you've already put up with it, there's a video on the channel where I break down the recent interview that Nomura did, and he talks about how in that scene where we're floating through the live stream with Sephiroth and he's showing us the nature of the planet and the nature of the worlds within the planet, Nomura says that a lot of these images could be different threads of the compilation that we've seen and different versions of the compilation that we've seen. And the suggestion is almost that certain things don't exist in the same world. So, like, potentially the OG is its own world, and then the compilation is its own world or set of worlds, and then Remake Rebirth is its own set of worlds. That's almost the suggestion that he makes. I do recommend go check out that video. I'm not going to ramble about it too much right now. But yeah, it's very interesting comments by Nomura. But I think it's time to finish this one off. So, thank you very much to everybody who's not only watched this video, but the previous 13 chapter breakdowns, because it's a bit of an investment, trust me, I know. So, thank you so much for watching them. We're going to get into the more usual content now and start dropping a lot more theory videos and breakdown videos of more specific, granular subjects. But on top of that, we're going to be posting a lot of other stuff. I've got content to post regarding Shin Megami Tensei 5. I've got content to post regarding numerous Square Enix games like Visions of Mana, Dragon Quest Monsters, Romancing Saga 2. There's so many things to talk about. So keep an eye out for everything on the channel. Also keep an eye out for... I think I am going to try and do a conclusion video that wraps this whole journey up that we've gone through, going through each chapter. So keep an eye out for that. But make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe for future content, and more importantly than all of that, Have a great day.